The original Division game was pretty, well, divisive. It did a great job of convincingly recreating the streets of New York City, but then it filled those streets with less convincing guys in bulletproof hoodies. Also, it got really boring near the end. So, will the Division 2 be any better?
Ubisoft showed off the upcoming Division 2 at E3 this year, and as you might expect, the company is talking a big game when it comes to improving on the polarizing original. The Division 2 arrives on PC, PS4 and Xbox One on March the 15th next year, and will do a few things differently to the game that kicked off the franchise back in 2016. Of course, it's still a shared world, live environment, third-person shooter, but this time it takes the action to a ruined Washington DC. The country is suffering in the grips of a heat wave. I know what that feels like.
Division 3, North Wales.
And nature is reclaiming the city, which is effectively lawless. More slow-burning, ongoing apocalypse, and less Mad Max post-apocalypse. The game world is about 20% bigger in terms of content and detail than the Division 1, but shares a similar one-to-one scale recreation, one of the original game's best strengths.
But the move in location and setting isn't the only significant detail that we've learned about this game recently. In an interview with Oz Gamers, Ubisoft Massive game director Matthias Carlson confirmed that while the game is a co-op experience, you can play it entirely solo if you want, and that includes the endgame content. Quote, "It's really a core principle for us that there is no right or wrong way to play the Division. You can play through the entire story campaign into endgame and then the endgame content alone." Now that same content is playable in 2, 3 or 4 player co-op, and then teams of 8 players can join up to take on the game's raid endgame content if they want a real challenge. But the main point is that players will have a choice, solo or co-op. Here's Matthias again, quote, "It's very important for us that you get to pick. Personally, I'm a co-op player. But many people at the office are like, that's cool, I like it in certain activities, but I want to have the bulk of the experience alone when I'm out exploring, so there's no right or wrong." Now all this does sound in line with the original game, but the key difference is the option to take on raids. Almost certainly not something players will want to do alone. The raid is the ultimate endgame activity, seen in MMOs in the past and most prominently in console shooter terms in Bungie's Destiny series. Raids were not featured in the First Division and represent a new high-end co-op challenge for players who've beaten the game's story. It is exactly the kind of thing that was missing from the original game's fairly lightweight endgame. Now a lot of the complaints about the Division 1 were about the endgame, like people were just beating the game, they were just powering through the story, exploring the map, and then they just found there was nothing to do, like very quickly. You have to remember the Division and Destiny as well were kind of like pioneering this shared world shooter kind of MMO light type thing where it's a halfway thing between being a single player third or first person game like Halo or a Tom Clancy game and an MMO like World of Warcraft, and they were trying to just reach this middle ground with it, and they were just kind of finding their feet. And then one of the big problems in both those games were endgame content. Once you finish the story, what do? You just nothing. You just keep shooting stuff and you get slightly better gear with slightly better numbers on it. That can be good, that can be, that is essentially what it is now. That is, but you've got to do it well, and you've got to do it in an entertaining way, and you've got to give people a reason to keep checking in. Having a raid in there is like key ingredient. It's like a basic thing that you need, and it's going to be in the Division 2.
And lack of endgame content is something Ubisoft CEO Igor acknowledged personally during a company earnings call back in May. The veteran games exec admitted the company had been surprised at just how quickly gamers ate through the content in the original Division, and it's something that they hope to address in the sequel. Quote, "So we've been working with the teams to bring a lot of content at launch and to be ready to continue to supply content a lot during the years that follow the launch. We are working hard to make sure we have lots of content available so people can stay in the game for the long run." Ubisoft CFO Alan Martinez shared similar sentiments during the same investor call. He said, quote, "Very clearly what we call the endgame part was something that the Division 1 could have improved, and we believe that we've got it now with the Division 2. Martinez also said that UB now has the right tools to deliver a much better game, while Guillermo said the company would be leveraging the experience of Division 1 to make Division 2 a fantastic game. Fantastic game, that's what we want, isn't it, Igor? Eager. He's eager to make it fantastic. game.
They've been saying it a lot. They were saying it at this conference, this earnings call, and saying it at E3. You know, it's going to be much better. It's going to be a better game than Division 1. We've learned loads. The end game is going to be better. And this interview was with Oz Gamers as well. Basically the same message.
Yeah.
It's going to be a better game than the Division 1. In terms of where Ubisoft is actually placing its focus this time around, director Matthias Carlson told Oz Gamers that the open world itself is very important. He said Ubisoft have been doing their best to make the open world more alive, which has been a recurrent theme among games at E3 this year. Here's what Carlson said on that. Quote, "It's running dynamic simulations of not just enemy factions, but also civilians in the city, out and about, acting on needs and goals, which generates not just movement in life around you, but also activities in the space for you to engage. So for me, as a gamer playing through the game, it is super exciting. What's going to come around the next corner, because it's always changing." He also said that NPCs will play a bigger role than in the first game, and players will have to offer help and rebuild the city's crumbling infrastructure. And one very interesting note from Carlson here is this, quote, "The more you play the Division 2, in many, many ways, the more there is to do, because you're building up yourself with all the activities in the world, so the world is going to react and change. And we're saving a little twist, a little surprise." Very interesting. Very interesting. I wonder what a little twist, a little surprise could be. Something good, hopefully.
I do want to ask, though, how that's going to work, because if what you're doing changes the world, it's a shared world, right?
Yeah.
How exactly does that work, then?
Well, in MMOs, there's like instances and stuff, isn't it? So you might go to a village or a town in like a traditional like fantasy RPG. It might be fine, but then you go back to it in a certain instance, and it might be like on fire or something like that. And only certain players can see that, or only you like load up the instance and you'll see it, and only you will see it like that. So it's going to be interesting how they do it. But it sounds like they've been really concentrating on this. They were talking a lot about like the impact of what you're doing. If you're like a Division agent and you're cleaning up the streets and you're like shooting all these like looters and whatever, and you're saving people and all that, shouldn't the city be improving because you're doing all this work? So that's the kind of logic that they're trying to apply to it, which sounds really cool, because that's true. In the Division 1, you're just shooting endless hordes of bad guys and the city stays exactly the same. It's quite a cool idea, I think, and it's something, it reminds me of like, you know, Dying Light. The Dying Light 2. That's something that a lot of developers are talking about these days, like your actions should be having an effect on the world. So that I want to see. I want to see what that looks like.
Carlson says the endgame of the Division 2 is going to be excellent on day one. So clearly, Ubisoft is acutely aware of the problems the Division 1 had at launch, even if that game was drastically improved with patches and updates post-release. He said the solution is not just to replay content during Endgame, but to experience new things as well, and to experience old things with a new twist. Endgame will be built around gear and the idea that players have specializations, which will give them more options in the way that they play. And the idea of impact is something Carlson repeated a lot. Player impact, player influence on the world will be reflected in the NPCs, the civilians living out their lives in the city. That includes what equipment they have, what territory they hold, and whether or not they come to help you. PvP multiplayer makes a return as well, with a revamped take on the Dark Zone PvP area from the original game. Post-launch support will also stay true to Ubisoft's recent form, with new content planned for release every 3 months after the base game comes out. And this is important to stress that Ubisoft have made a go of a lot of their online service-based games recently, and they've turned fortunes around. We've talked about it in the past, For Honor, Rainbow Six Siege.
The Division 1.
The Division 1's doing pretty well, and it seems like they're going about that the right way in future, and they did say that their first year of release, like the first 3 content patches are free at the very least, so I don't know how that goes on from there, but it seems like they've got a good plan in place for how Division 2 is going to go at launch and for the first year after.
So at least Ubisoft sounds like they are aware of what was wrong with the Division 1 and they want to make amends with the Division 2. Does this fill you with faith? Did you try out the first one and not really like it? Maybe is this gonna change your mind? Are you gonna check out Division 2? Let us know down in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. There's another one right there which you can watch right now if you want, and a link to Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.